The crumbling archive smelled of ancient stone and ozone, its flickering light panels barely illuminating the rows of alien script etched into walls that stretched endlessly in every direction. Captain Adrian Blake adjusted his breathing mask and brushed a layer of dust off the interface of a cracked terminal. He was alone except for the hum of his scanner and the distant whirring of machinery that hadn't seen maintenance in centuries. "Still no signal," came a voice over his earpiece. It was Lyra Voss, his assistant, monitoring the operation from their ship. "You're deep in the dead zone. I'm surprised the archive hasn't collapsed completely." "It's holding together, barely," Adrian muttered, his voice dry with irritation. "I'm close to something. The map fragment I found pointed here for a reason." This was supposed to be his redemption mission. After years of unremarkable expeditions and a high-profile failure that left his career in ruins, Adrian had taken on a risky contract with the Galactic Archive Collective. The GAC wasn't glamorous work, scouring ruins and forgotten star systems for scraps of historical data, but it allowed him a chance to rebuild his name. Still, doubts gnawed at him as he worked. Could he uncover anything of value? Would this mission only add another black mark to his record? The terminal buzzed faintly, its cracked screen flickering to life. Alien symbols scrolled rapidly, too fast for Adrian to decipher. He keyed a translator into his wrist scanner and watched as the lines shifted into a language he could understand. One phrase leapt out, sending a chill down his spine. "Terra, the cradle of myths." Adrian froze, his gloved fingers hovering over the keyboard. Terra. He'd read the stories during his academy years, fables passed down through galactic history about a long-extinct species called humans. Some claimed they were a violent, self-destructive race that had wiped themselves out in a cataclysmic war. Others whispered of their unparalleled ingenuity and technological prowess, suggesting their creations might still lie hidden among the stars. But no credible evidence had ever been found. Humanity had always been dismissed as little more than a legend. Until now. "Lyra," Adrian said, his voice tinged with urgency. "I found something." A reference to Terra's silence crackled over the comm line before Lyra responded, her tone skeptical. "You're not serious." "Terra? As in the human myth?" "Exactly. And there's more." He scanned further down the translation. "Coordinates, they point to a star system far outside charted space." Lyra's laughter was dry and humorless. "You're chasing ghosts, Adrian. Even if it's real, what's the point? The GAC won't fund a wild goose chase for some fairy tale." Adrian hesitated. He knew Lyra was right. His superiors wouldn't approve an unsanctioned mission, especially one based on rumors, but something about this find ignited a spark of curiosity he hadn't felt in years. The coordinates pulsed on the screen like a heartbeat, daring him to follow. "It's not about funding," he said finally. "If there's even a chance this is real, we owe it to history to investigate." Lyra sighed. "You do realize this could ruin what's left of your career, right?" "I'm already on borrowed time," Adrian replied, his voice firm. "Prep the ship. We're going." The flight back to the ship was uneventful, but Adrian's thoughts churned with anticipation. If the stories of humanity were true, their legacy could change everything. The Galactic Archive Collective was a bureaucratic mess, more concerned with cataloging mundane artifacts than uncovering meaningful truths. Humanity's existence, confirmed or disproven, would shake the foundations of galactic history. It might even shift the balance of power among the galaxy's dominant factions. As Adrian climbed aboard the Pioneer's Edge, his aging exploration vessel, he found Lyra waiting for him in the cockpit. Her arms were crossed, and her expression was a mix of resignation and exasperation. "You're lucky I'm loyal," she said, tossing him a data pad. "I've already plotted the coordinates, but don't expect me to keep quiet if this turns into another disaster." Adrian smirked, grateful for her support despite her grumbling. "You'll thank me when we make the biggest discovery in galactic history." The ship's engines hummed to life as they broke free of the Archive's orbit and entered hyperspace. The journey to the uncharted system would take several days, giving Adrian time to review the Archive's data logs. He sifted through fragmentary entries, piecing together a picture of humanity that was equal parts awe-inspiring and terrifying. According to the records, humans had achieved unparalleled technological advancements. They'd constructed Dyson Spheres to harness the energy of entire stars, created artificial ecosystems that spanned planets, and built a network of faster-than-light gates connecting their empire. But their ambition had also led to their downfall. The final entry in the log spoke of a civil war so catastrophic that it obliterated their civilization and left only scattered remnants behind. "They were brilliant," Adrian murmured, staring at the logs in disbelief. "And so reckless." "Sounds familiar?" Lyra quipped from the cockpit. You think their ruins are out there, waiting for us? They have to be, Adrian said. No species that advanced could vanish without leaving something behind. The days passed in tense anticipation until the Pioneer's Edge emerged from hyperspace. The star system ahead was a graveyard of cosmic anomalies, darkened planets, shattered moons, and a massive debris field encircling the central star. Adrian's heart raced as he took in the scene. If the myths were true, this could be where humanity had made their final stand. This is it, he said, his voice low with reverence. The coordinates match. Lyra's expression was less optimistic. It looks like a war zone. Are you sure we're not walking into a trap? Adrian didn't answer. His focus was on a massive structure orbiting the star, a faintly glowing sphere that dwarfed anything he'd ever seen. Its surface was marred with cracks and scorch marks, but it radiated a sense of ancient power. A Dyson Sphere, he whispered, his breath catching. Human-built. Before Lyra could respond, the ship's sensors blared a warning. Automated defense systems, dormant for millennia, had suddenly activated, locking onto the Pioneer's Edge. The ship shook violently as energy projectiles streaked past, narrowly missing their hull. Adrian, Lyra shouted. We're under attack. Evasive maneuvers. Adrian barked, gripping the controls. His mind raced as he searched for a way to deactivate the defenses. The Sphere's systems were ancient, but if he could decipher their command protocols, he might be able to override them. As the ship dodged another volley, Adrian's determination hardened. He had come too far to turn back now. The truth about humanity was within reach, and he would risk everything to uncover it. The sphere loomed larger in the viewport, its cracked surface glowing ominously. Adrian keyed in a final sequence, hoping against hope that the human legends would guide him. Hold on, he muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. We're about to make history. The Pioneer's Edge hurtled through hyperspace, its aging engines humming with a comforting regularity. Captain Adrian Blake leaned back in the pilot's seat, his eyes fixed on the endless stream of distorted stars visible through the cockpit window. Lyra Voss sat to his right, her fingers flying across the console as she monitored their trajectory. You've gone quiet, Lyra said, her tone lighter than usual. That means you're thinking too much. Care to share? Adrian didn't immediately respond. His mind was caught between excitement and doubt. The coordinates they were chasing, coordinates tied to the ancient and mythical species called humans, felt like both a discovery of a lifetime and a fool's errand. The Dyson Sphere they'd seen in the distance had been extraordinary, but its automated defenses had forced them to retreat temporarily, buying them time to regroup and plan. Now, they were heading deeper into the system to search for another entry point. I'm just wondering how much of this is real, Adrian admitted finally. What if it's all just relics of another species? What if humans never existed? Lyra glanced at him. You don't really believe that. The archive's data was too specific, and that sphere, it practically screamed human. Besides, you've never chased a lead this obsessively before. Admit it, you believe. Adrian gave her a wry smile. I believe in the possibility. That's enough to keep me going. The ship's console pinged, cutting through the moment. Lyra leaned forward, frowning as new data scrolled across her screen. We're approaching the coordinates, she said. There's something here. Large structures. Energy signatures are faint but still active. Adrian's pulse quickened. Bring it up on the visual. The ship dropped out of hyperspace, and the sight before them stole Adrian's breath. Floating against the backdrop of the darkened system were colossal, decayed structures, hulking masses of metal and stone, tethered together by crumbling cables. Some resembled massive space stations, while others had shapes that defied logic, as though they had been crafted by minds that saw the universe differently. What are we looking at? Lyra whispered, awe creeping into her voice. Ruins, Adrian said, his voice tinged with wonder. But not just any ruins. They look like the remnants of an entire orbital civilization. Lyra adjusted the ship's scanners, focusing on the largest of the structures. I'm picking up faint energy signatures from that one. Looks like it might still have functional systems. Set us down, Adrian ordered, already reaching for his gear. If there's anything left of humanity, it'll be in there. The Pioneer's Edge maneuvered carefully through the debris field, dodging chunks of metal and shattered asteroids. As they approached the largest structure, its sheer scale became apparent. It was a behemoth, a sprawling city in space suspended in the void. Towering spires jutted out at odd angles, their surfaces scorched and pitted from what looked like centuries of battle. The ship's landing gear touched down on a relatively stable platform. Adrian and Lyra donned their suits, securing their helmets before stepping into the airlock. The chamber hissed as the atmosphere inside the ship was replaced by a vacuum seal. Moments later, the outer doors opened, revealing the eerie silence of the ruins. Adrian's boots crunched softly against the surface as he stepped out. The platform beneath him was covered in dust and debris, but faint traces of glowing lines ran through the metal, pulsing like veins of a long-dormant organism. "This place is ancient," Lyra murmured, her voice crackling slightly over the comms. "Whatever happened here, it's been dead for centuries." Adrian nodded, his eyes scanning their surroundings. The scale of the structure was overwhelming, but it was the details that caught his attention. Symbols etched into the walls, faintly glowing panels embedded in the ground. All of it seemed familiar, as though humanity's fingerprints were still present in this forgotten corner of the galaxy. "Over here," Lyra called, motioning toward an arched doorway that led into the heart of the structure. "There's a terminal. Looks intact." Adrian joined her, crouching to examine the console. It was covered in dust, but its surface was smooth and dark, like polished obsidian. He brushed it off and tapped the edge, and to his surprise, the screen flickered to life. Lines of text scrolled across it, written in a language he couldn't immediately recognize. "It's encrypted," Lyra said, pulling out her handheld translator. "Give me a second." As Lyra worked, Adrian glanced around the chamber. The architecture was unlike anything he'd seen before, both advanced and strangely organic, as though the structure had been designed to grow rather than be built. It reminded him of the stories he'd read about human ingenuity, their ability to blend technology and nature seamlessly. "Got it," Lyra said, breaking his train of thought. "The translation's rough, but I think this is some kind of log. It's... Wow." "What?" Adrian asked, leaning over to look at the screen. Lyra's eyes widened as she read aloud. "It says, 'We built this sanctuary as a testament to our greatest triumphs and our darkest failures. To those who come after, remember us not as gods, but as flawed dreamers who reached too far.'" Adrian felt a chill run down his spine. The words were unmistakably human, poetic, introspective, and filled with the kind of humility that came only from hard-won wisdom. "There's more," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The log references something called the Vault. It's deep within the structure, and it's where they stored their most important knowledge. Schematics, history, culture, everything." Adrian's heart raced. "We need to find it." Before Lyra could respond, the ship's comm system crackled to life. It was an automated warning from the Pioneer's edge. "Incoming vessels detected." The voice droned. "Multiple signatures. Hostile configuration." Lyra cursed. "The Zarth Dominion. They've found us." Adrian's jaw tightened. The Zarth Dominion was one of the most powerful factions in the galaxy, known for their ruthlessness and their obsession with control. If they were here, it wasn't by coincidence. They wanted to erase whatever humanity had left behind. "Seal the ship's systems," Adrian ordered. "We can't let them access our data." "What about us?" Lyra asked, her voice tense. "We keep moving," Adrian said, gripping his plasma torch tightly. "If they want to stop us, they'll have to catch us first." The two of them hurried deeper into the structure, their movements lit by the faint glow of the walls. Behind them, the sounds of approaching engines grew louder, echoing ominously through the ruins. "Adrian," Lyra said as they ran, "what if we don't make it? What if the Zarth destroy everything?" Adrian didn't slow down. "Then we'll make sure they know humanity existed, and we'll make sure they remember." Ahead of them, the corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with towering columns of light. It was unlike anything they'd seen before, a place that felt alive, humming with energy and potential, and at its center was a doorway marked with a single glowing symbol, the unmistakable outline of a human hand. Adrian stared at the glowing handprint etched into the doorway. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, casting soft light into the cavernous chamber. The symbol was simple yet unmistakably human, a testament to the species that once thrived in this forgotten corner of the galaxy. "It's incredible," Lyra murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "A symbol so simple, yet it feels profound." "They left their mark, Adrian. This is proof." Adrian didn't respond immediately. His fingers brushed the surface of the handprint, feeling the faint warmth it emitted. He glanced back at Lyra, who was scanning the room with her handheld device. The towering columns of light surrounding them seemed to hum with dormant energy, casting long shadows across the metallic floor. "Proof isn't enough," Adrian said finally. "We need to uncover their story, the why, the how, and most importantly, the what. What happened to them?" Lyra nodded, her expression growing serious. "The Zarth are closing in, Adrian. If we're going to find answers, we need to move fast." Adrian turned back to the handprint. The lines of the symbol began to shift, rearranging themselves into a sequence of glowing symbols. It was a puzzle, a test left behind by humanity to guard their secrets. Adrian's mind raced as he studied the pattern. "This isn't random," he said, more to himself than to Lyra. "It's an algorithm, a sequence meant to be solved." Lyra stepped closer, her scanner beeping softly as she analyzed the doorway. "The pattern is recursive. It's based on a logarithmic scale, similar to the Fibonacci sequence. If we can crack the code, we might be able to unlock it." Adrian worked quickly, his hands flying over his portable terminal as he input the sequence. The symbols pulsed brighter with each correct entry, and the hum of the chamber grew louder, as if the structure itself were awakening. Finally, with a soft chime, the doorway slid open, revealing a narrow corridor bathed in a faint golden light. "Let's go," Adrian said, stepping forward. "The answers are in there." The corridor led them deeper into the heart of the structure. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, each depicting scenes of humanity's rise and fall. Adrian paused briefly to examine one of the murals. It showed towering cities that seemed to pierce the skies, bustling with life and activity. In the next panel, those same cities lay in ruins, consumed by fire and chaos. "They were brilliant," Lyra said, running her hand along the carvings, "but reckless. Their ambition destroyed them." "Maybe," Adrian replied, his tone thoughtful, "but ambition also built all this. Without it, they wouldn't have achieved what they did. It's a double-edged sword." They reached the end of the corridor, where another doorway awaited them. This one was unguarded, sliding open silently as they approached. Inside was a massive chamber, its walls lined with holographic panels that flickered to life as they entered. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it rested a small, cube-like device, glowing softly. "This has to be it," Adrian said, his voice low with reverence. "The vault." Lyra approached cautiously, scanning the cube with her device. "It's encrypted, but the energy readings are off the charts. This thing could hold centuries' worth of data." Adrian reached out, his hand hovering over the cube. For a moment, he hesitated, aware of the weight of what he was about to uncover. Then he placed his hand on the device, and the room came alive. Holograms filled the air, displaying fragmented scenes of humanity's history. Adrian and Lyra watched in stunned silence as the images unfolded around them. One projection showed a lush green planet, Earth, teeming with life. Cities sprawled across its surface, their designs a perfect blend of nature and technology. Humans moved through the streets, their faces filled with purpose and determination. Another projection shifted to space, where massive ships traversed the stars. Dyson Spheres glowed brilliantly, harnessing the energy of entire stars to power humanity's empire. It was a vision of a civilization at its peak, creative, adaptable, and endlessly ambitious. But the scenes soon grew darker. The holograms depicted heated debates in vast council chambers, factions forming and tensions rising. Then came the wars. Explosions tore through planets, ships collided in fiery infernos, and cities were reduced to ash. Humanity's ambition had turned inward, consuming itself in a catastrophic civil war. "It's exactly as the myths described," Lyra whispered. "They were unstoppable until they weren't." Adrian stepped closer to the holograms, his jaw clenched as he absorbed the tragic narrative. "They didn't just destroy themselves," he said. "They erased themselves. Look," he pointed to a projection showing humans dismantling their own technology, scrubbing data, and leaving behind cryptic warnings for anyone who might follow. It was a deliberate act, a final effort to prevent their mistakes from repeating. "They knew they'd lost control," Adrian continued, "so they tried to bury their legacy, hoping it would never be found." "But why leave this?" Lyra asked, motioning to the vault. "Why leave a record if they didn't want anyone to find it?" "Maybe they knew someone would eventually," Adrian said, "and maybe they hoped we'd be different." Their moment of discovery was cut short by the sound of blaring alarms. The vault's holograms flickered and dimmed, replaced by a warning message in bold, glowing text. "Unauthorized access detected. Defensive protocols activated." Adrian spun around, his heart sinking. "The Zarth. They've breached the outer perimeter." Lyra cursed under her breath. "We need to get out of here. If they find the vault." "They won't," Adrian said, his voice firm. "We're not letting them destroy this." He grabbed the cube and secured it in a protective case, shutting down the holograms. The chamber plunged into darkness, lit only by the faint glow of the carvings on the walls. Adrian and Lyra activated their suit lights, and sprinted back down the corridor, their boots echoing loudly against the metal floor. As they neared the exit, the sound of footsteps and raised voices reached their ears. Adrian peeked around the corner and saw a group of Zarth operatives advancing toward them, their weapons drawn. "We're outnumbered," Lyra whispered, her voice tense. "What's the plan?" Adrian's mind raced. The structure's defenses had activated once before when they first arrived. If he could reawaken them, they might have a chance. "Stall them," he said, pulling a small toolkit from his belt. "I'll reactivate the defenses." Lyra nodded, drawing her plasma pistol. "Don't take too long." As Lyra engaged the Zarth operatives, Adrian worked quickly, connecting his terminal to a nearby control panel. The system was ancient, its interface barely comprehensible, but he managed to find the defensive protocols buried within the code. His fingers flew over the keyboard, bypassing corrupted files and reactivating dormant systems. Behind him he heard the hiss of plasma fire and Lyra's voice shouting orders. The Zarth were closing in. Come on," Adrian muttered, his heart pounding. Finally, with a triumphant beep, the system came online. The chamber shook as hidden turrets emerged from the walls, firing bursts of energy at the Zarth. The operatives scrambled for cover, their shouts drowned out by the roar of the automated defenses. Lyra retreated to Adrian's side, breathing heavily. "Nice work, but this won't hold them forever." "It doesn't have to," Adrian said. "We've got what we came for. Let's move." The two of them sprinted back to the Pioneer's edge, the Zarth forces temporarily held at bay. As the ship's engines roared to life, Adrian glanced at the cube in his hands. Humanity's story was now theirs to tell, but the cost of uncovering it was only beginning to reveal itself. The Pioneer's edge burst out of the ruins like a cornered animal, its thrusters firing at maximum capacity. Adrian gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white as he maneuvered the ship through the dense debris field. Behind them, the Zarth ships loomed larger on the scanners, their sleek designs built for speed and pursuit. "They're gaining on us." Lyra's voice was sharp, laced with urgency as she monitored the tactical displays. 4 ships, all armed to the teeth. This isn't just a recon team, they came prepared. Adrian's jaw tightened. They knew we'd find something. That's why they're here. They want to destroy it before anyone else learns the truth. He glanced at the glowing cube secured in the storage bay. The data it contained, the story of humanity's rise and fall, was priceless. If the Zarth Dominion captured or destroyed it, centuries of lost history would vanish forever. "We're not giving them the chance," Adrian said, determination hardening his voice. "What's our status?" "Shields are at 70%, but they won't last long under sustained fire," Lyra replied. "Weapon systems are online, but let's be real. This bucket isn't built for combat. We can hold them off, but we can't outrun them." Adrian considered their options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and far from any friendly territory. The Zarth Dominion was relentless when it came to suppressing knowledge they deemed dangerous, and humanity's legacy fell squarely into that category. If they wanted to survive, they needed more than speed or firepower. They needed ingenuity. "Bring up the map of the Dyson Spheres interior," Adrian said, an idea forming in his mind. Lyra frowned but complied, pulling up the holographic schematics they'd managed to extract from the ruins. The Dyson Sphere was a labyrinthine structure, its interior filled with conduits, tunnels, and massive chambers designed to support its long-abandoned systems. "What are you thinking?" Lyra asked, glancing at him. Adrian pointed to a section of the map. "The Sphere's defensive systems are still active, but they're localized. If we can lead the Zarth ships into one of the active zones, we might be able to turn the Sphere's defenses against them." Lyra's eyes widened. "That's a suicide run. The defenses almost tore us apart when we landed, and now you want to fly straight into them?" Adrian met her gaze, his expression resolute. "It's our only shot. If we try to fight them head-on, we'll lose. If we run, they'll catch us. But if we use the Sphere's systems, we can level the playing field." Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But if we die, I'm haunting you." The Pioneer's edge veered sharply, its engines flaring as Adrian directed the ship back toward the Dyson Sphere. The Zarth ships followed, their weapons lighting up the void with bursts of plasma fire. Explosions rippled across the debris field, as the smaller fragments were obliterated by stray shots. "Shields at 50%, Lyra called out. "If this plan of yours doesn't work, we're toast." "It'll work," Adrian said through gritted teeth. "Just keep them off our tail long enough to reach the entry point." The sphere loomed ahead, its cracked surface glowing faintly with residual energy. Adrian guided the ship toward a massive breach in the structure, a gaping hole that led into one of the active zones. The Zarth ships followed closely, their pilots clearly confident in their ability to outmaneuver Adrian's battered vessel. "They're right on us," Lyra warned. We won't make it through the breach without taking a hit. Adrian's mind raced. He couldn't afford to let the Zarth destroy their ship before they reached the defenses. He flipped a switch on the console, activating the Pioneer's Edge's decoy system. Deploying countermeasures, he said. This should buy us some time. Small pods ejected from the ship's hull, each emitting bursts of electromagnetic interference. The Zarth ships faltered. Their targeting systems momentarily scrambled. That won't hold them for long, Lyra said, her voice tense. It doesn't have to, Adrian replied. We're almost there. The Pioneer's Edge dove into the breach, its thrusters firing in rapid bursts to navigate the narrow passage. The interior of the sphere was a chaotic maze of collapsed structures, glowing conduits and dormant machinery. Adrian weaved through the debris with practiced precision, his focus unyielding. Behind them, the Zarth ships entered the breach, their weapons firing indiscriminately in an attempt to disable Adrian's ship. The blasts ricocheted off the walls, triggering small explosions that illuminated the dark passage. Now would be a good time to activate those defenses, Lyra said, her tone edging toward panic. Adrian nodded, his hands moving quickly over the controls. He accessed the sphere's systems through the interface they'd decoded earlier, searching for the command protocols that controlled the active defenses. Come on, he muttered. Where are you? The ship shuddered as a plasma bolt grazed its hull, sending a jolt through the cabin. Alarms blared, and Lyra cursed under her breath. Shields at 20%, she shouted. Adrian, whatever you're doing, do it faster. Finally, Adrian found the protocol he was looking for. He input the activation sequence, and the sphere responded with a deep, resonant hum. Lights flickered to life along the walls, and automated turrets emerged from hidden compartments. It's online, Adrian said, relief flooding his voice. Let's see how they like this. The turrets opened fire, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts that tore through the Zarth ships. Two of the vessels were hit almost immediately, their shields disintegrating under the assault. The third ship veered sharply, trying to avoid the onslaught, but collided with a piece of debris and exploded in a fiery burst. That's 3 down, Lyra said, a hint of triumph in her voice. But the fourth one's still coming. The remaining Zarth ship managed to evade the sphere's defenses, its pilot clearly skilled. It closed the distance between them, its weapons locking onto the Pioneer's Edge. Brace yourself, Adrian shouted, pulling the ship into a sharp dive. The Zarth ship fired, its plasma bolts narrowly missing their hull. Adrian pushed the Pioneer's Edge to its limits, weaving through the debris and using the sphere's structure for cover. He led the Zarth ship deeper into the active zone, where the defenses were strongest. This is it, he said. Hold on. Adrian directed the ship toward a cluster of glowing conduits, their energy levels spiking dangerously. The Zarth ship followed, its weapons blazing. As they passed the conduits, Adrian triggered an overload sequence through his terminal. The conduits erupted in a blinding surge of energy, engulfing the Zarth ship in a massive explosion. The Pioneer's Edge rocked violently from the shockwave, its systems straining to stay operational. Adrian fought to stabilize the ship, his hands steady despite the chaos. When the turbulence subsided, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Status? Lyra checked the displays. Shields are critical, but we're intact. The Zarth ships are gone. Adrian nodded, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Good, then we still have a chance. He guided the Pioneer's Edge out of the active zone, the Dyson Sphere fading into the distance as they escaped. The cube sat securely in its case, a fragile yet invaluable treasure. We're not safe yet, Lyra said, her voice cautious. The Zarth will send more ships when they realize what happened. Let them, Adrian said, his resolve unshaken. Humanity's story is worth the fight, no matter what. The Pioneer's Edge emerged from the Dyson Sphere, its battered hull glowing faintly in the dim light of the star system. Adrian and Lyra sat in silence, their breathing heavy after the narrow escape from the Zarth forces. The cube, humanity's legacy, sat secured in its case, a quiet reminder of the monumental stakes of their mission. Adrian broke the silence. How long until they send reinforcements? Lyra scanned the monitors, her face grim. Not long. They'll have tracked our signal through the sphere's defenses. If we don't get out of this system soon, we're finished. Adrian leaned back in his seat, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. We can't run, Lyra. Not yet. Her head snapped toward him. What do you mean, not yet? We barely survived the first wave and the ship's falling apart. We need to leave now. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. If we run, they'll chase us down. But if we stay and fight, we can use the sphere's defenses to even the odds. It's the only way to protect the cube. Lyra's expression hardened. You're talking about taking on an entire Zarth fleet with a ship that's held together by duct tape and a prayer. Adrian gave a faint smile. No, I'm talking about taking on the Zarth fleet with the most advanced technology humanity ever built. The ship's engines groaned as Adrian guided the Pioneer's edge back toward the Dyson Sphere. The structure loomed like a ghost, its fractured surface glowing faintly with residual energy. Adrian keyed into the ship's communication system, accessing the Sphere's interface through the codes he had decrypted earlier. The Sphere's defenses are damaged, but they're still functional, Adrian said, his eyes scanning the readouts. We can redirect power to the weapon systems, but we'll need to stay inside the Sphere to control them. Lyra groaned. So, we're making ourselves a stationary target? Great plan, Captain. Adrian smirked. It's better than running. Besides, they won't expect us to stand our ground. The ship maneuvered into a secure docking port within the Sphere, its systems syncing with the ancient structure's interface. Adrian's terminal lit up with a cascade of data, the complex language of humanity's technology translating into actionable commands. This is incredible, Adrian murmured, his fingers flying over the keyboard. The Sphere isn't just a defensive structure. It's a weapon. They built it to protect their legacy. Lyra peered over his shoulder, her skepticism giving way to awe. You're saying this thing was designed for war? Not just war, Adrian said. It was designed for survival. The first wave of Zarth ships arrived within minutes, their sleek forms emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. Adrian watched them on the ship's scanners, a cold determination settling over him. They're scanning the Sphere, Lyra said. They don't know we're inside yet. Good, Adrian replied. That gives us the element of surprise. He activated the Sphere's targeting systems, directing the dormant turrets to focus on the Zarth fleet. The interface hummed with energy as the Sphere awakened, its ancient systems roaring to life. The Zarth ships began their approach, their weapons charging. Adrian waited until they were within range before issuing the command. Fire. The Dyson Sphere erupted with light as its turrets unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. The Zarth ships scrambled to evade, their formations breaking apart as the Sphere's defenses tore through their ranks. One ship exploded in a brilliant burst of fire and debris, while another spiraled out of control, its engines disabled. Lyra whooped in triumph. That's 2 down. This thing still has some fight left in it. Adrian didn't share her enthusiasm. The Zarth fleet was adapting quickly, their remaining ships coordinating to target the Sphere's weak points. He redirected power to the shields, bracing for the inevitable counterattack. They're not backing off, Lyra said, her voice tense. They're sending in reinforcements. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then we hold the line. The next wave hit harder. The Zarth ships fired relentlessly, their plasma cannons hammering the Sphere's shields. The structure shuddered under the assault, its systems straining to keep up. We're losing power, Lyra shouted. The shields won't hold much longer. Adrian worked frantically at the controls, rerouting energy from non-essential systems to bolster the defenses. The Sphere's response was slower now, its ancient machinery struggling to keep pace with the demands of modern warfare. We need more firepower, Lyra said. Is there anything else this thing can do? Adrian hesitated, his eyes scanning the interface. The Sphere's systems were vast and complex, with many functions still locked behind encrypted protocols. One command caught his attention, a system labeled Nova Core Overload. What's that? Lyra asked, noticing the command. Adrian's heart sank as he read the description. It's a last resort. The Sphere's core can generate a massive energy pulse, enough to disable everything in the system, including us? Lyra asked, her voice sharp. Adrian nodded. If we use it, there's no guarantee we'll survive. Lyra stared at him, then at the readouts showing the Zarth reinforcements closing in. Do we have another choice? The Zarth fleet unleashed another wave of fire, breaching the Sphere's shields. Explosions rippled through the structure, sending shockwaves that rocked the Pioneer's edge. Adrian, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the chaos. It's now or never. Adrian's fingers hovered over the controls. He thought of the cube, the knowledge it held, and the centuries of history that had been lost. Humanity's story deserved to be told, no matter the cost. Activating Nova Core Overload, he said, his voice calm. Hold on. He entered the command, and the Sphere's systems roared to life. The entire structure began to glow, its energy conduits pulsing brighter and brighter. The Zarth fleet hesitated, their ships retreating as they detected the spike in energy levels. It's working, Lyra said. They're pulling back, but Adrian knew it wouldn't be enough. The overload would take time to reach full power, and the Zarth wouldn't retreat far. They'd wait until the sphere's defenses were spent, then finish what they'd started. "Lyra," Adrian said, his voice soft. "It's been an honor." Her eyes widened. "Don't you dare." The sphere's core erupted in a blinding pulse of light, flooding the entire system with energy. The Zarth ships were caught in the blast, their systems overloaded as they disintegrated in fiery explosions. The Pioneer's Edge was flung backward, its systems shutting down as the wave of energy consumed everything. Adrian awoke to silence. The ship was dark, its systems offline. He groaned, his body aching from the impact. "Lyra," he called out. A faint groan came from the cockpit. "Still alive?" "Barely." Adrian managed a weak smile. "We did it." The ship's emergency systems flickered on, and Adrian checked the status of the cube. It was intact, its glow undimmed. "The Zarth are gone," Lyra said, her voice filled with relief. "But so is the sphere." Adrian nodded, his heart heavy. The Dyson Sphere had been humanity's final monument, and now it was gone. Sacrificed to protect its story. But in that sacrifice, humanity's legacy had been preserved. Adrian stared out at the debris field, the weight of their victory settling over him. "They'll come for us again," he said, "but they'll never silence the truth." Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then let's make sure the galaxy hears it." Adrian smiled faintly, his resolve unshaken. Humanity's story wasn't just a legend anymore. It was a warning, a lesson, and a legacy, and it was worth every fight. The Pioneer's Edge drifted in the silence of space, the once intimidating Dyson Sphere now reduced to a smoldering field of debris. Adrian and Lyra worked feverishly to bring their ship back online. The emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the cabin, their glow punctuated by the faint hum of life support systems struggling to stabilize. Lyra wiped sweat from her brow, her hands stained with grease from repairing the ship's power conduits. "We've got partial thrusters and shields back, but the comms are still dead. If anyone's out there looking for us, we won't know until it's too late." Adrian nodded grimly, his focus fixed on the glowing cube resting in its secure case. Humanity's story was inside that small device, a record of their brilliance, their folly, and their ultimate sacrifice. The thought weighed heavily on him. So much knowledge, so much history, entrusted to him and Lyra to protect. "We don't need comms," Adrian said, his voice quiet but resolute. "We need to get this cube out of here and into the hands of someone who can ensure the galaxy knows the truth." Lyra glanced at him, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "Assuming we can even make it out of this system, the ship's barely holding together, and the Zarth might still have reinforcements on the way." "They will," Adrian said, standing and pacing the small cockpit. "But we've bought ourselves some time. That sphere's destruction sent a clear message. We won't let them bury the past." Lyra smirked faintly, leaning back against the console. "You're starting to sound like one of those heroic types from the old Hollows. You planning on giving a dramatic speech next?" Adrian chuckled softly. "Maybe later. For now, let's focus on staying alive." The ship's scanners flickered back to life, displaying a dim but functional view of the surrounding system. The Dyson Sphere's destruction had created a sprawling field of debris, much of it still glowing faintly with residual energy. The wreckage blocked most of their routes, making a straight escape impossible. "We'll need to navigate through the debris field," Adrian said, studying the scanner. "The Zarth will expect us to take the obvious path out. If we keep to the shadows, we might be able to slip past them." Lyra adjusted the controls, her movements precise despite the strain in her shoulders. "Fine, but if we run into more trouble, I'm going to blame your never back down speech." Adrian grinned. "Noted." The Pioneer's Edge moved cautiously through the debris, its thrusters firing in controlled bursts to avoid detection. The ship's sensors were still partially offline, leaving them reliant on visual navigation. Every flicker of light or shadow set Adrian on edge, his hand hovering over the control panel, ready to react at a moment's notice. As they weaved through the wreckage, Adrian couldn't help but marvel at the remnants of the Dyson Sphere. Massive shards of its surface floated in the void, their edges glowing faintly with the energy that had once powered an entire star. Here and there, fragments of human craftsmanship, panels inscribed with intricate designs, conduits filled with dormant nanotech, reminded him of the species that had built this marvel. They were incredible, Adrian said softly, almost to himself. Lyra glanced at him. "What, the humans?" Adrian nodded. "They achieved so much, created wonders we can barely comprehend, and yet, they fell to the same flaws we see in every species. Greed, pride, division. It's tragic, but also inspiring." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Inspiring? How?" "They knew their flaws, Adrian said. That's why they left the message in the vault. They wanted future civilizations to learn from their mistakes to avoid repeating their fate. Lyra sighed, her expression softening. I hope someone actually listens. The tension in the cockpit eased slightly as they made progress through the debris field, but that brief reprieve was shattered when the ship's proximity alarms blared. Contact! Lyra shouted, her hands flying to the controls. It's a Zarth scout. One ship, fast and heavily armed. Adrian's heart sank. They found us. The Zarth scout appeared on their scanner, its sleek silhouette cutting through the debris with ease. Its weapons lit up, firing a volley of plasma bolts that streaked toward the Pioneer's edge. Adrian yanked the controls, sending the ship into a sharp dive to avoid the attack. Shields are barely holding, Lyra called out. We can't take another hit like that. Adrian gritted his teeth, his mind racing. The ship's weapons were operational, but they were no match for the Zarth scout's advanced firepower. They needed a strategy. And fast. Head for that larger fragment, Adrian said, pointing to a massive piece of the Dyson Spheres' outer shell. We can use it for cover. Lyra nodded, steering the ship toward the fragment. The Zarth scout followed, its weapons firing relentlessly. Plasma bolts grazed the Pioneer's edge, sending sparks flying through the cockpit. Adrian activated the ship's weapons, targeting the debris around them. Explosions erupted as the fragments shattered, creating a cloud of shrapnel that forced the Zarth scout to slow its pursuit. That bought us a little time, Lyra said, her voice tense. But we can't keep running like this. Adrian's eyes narrowed as an idea formed. We won't. I've got a plan. Adrian directed the Pioneer's edge toward the largest fragment of the Dyson Sphere, a massive slab of metal and circuitry that still pulsed faintly with energy. He accessed the ship's interface, syncing it with the fragment systems. What are you doing? Lyra asked, her tone wary. Human tech is still active, Adrian said, his fingers flying over the controls. If I can override the fragment systems, I can turn it into a weapon. Lyra's eyes widened. You're going to use it against the scout? Exactly, Adrian said, but I'll need you to keep them distracted while I work. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but if this doesn't work, I'm haunting you in the afterlife. Adrian smirked. You've already promised that once. Lyra maneuvered the ship to draw the Zarth scout's fire, weaving through the debris with practiced precision. Meanwhile, Adrian worked furiously to access the fragment systems. The interface was ancient and uncooperative, but he pressed on, his determination unshaken. Almost there, he muttered, sweat dripping down his brow. The Zarth scout closed in, its weapons hammering the Pioneer's edge. Lyra pushed the ship to its limits, dodging and weaving through the chaos. Adrian, she shouted, I can't keep this up much longer. Got it, Adrian exclaimed, slamming his hand on the console. The fragment systems roared to life, emitting a blinding pulse of energy. The Zarth scout froze in its tracks, its systems overloaded by the surge. Sparks erupted from its hull as it spiraled out of control, crashing into the debris field in a fiery explosion. Lyra let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was insane. Adrian grinned, his relief palpable, but it worked. The Pioneer's edge emerged from the debris field, the remnants of the Zarth scout fading into the distance. Adrian and Lyra sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their victory settling over them. We did it, Lyra said softly. We actually did it. Adrian nodded, his gaze fixed on the glowing cube. This isn't just about us. It's about them. Humanity's story deserves to be told. Lyra smiled faintly. Then let's make sure it is. The ship's engines flared as they set course for safe space, carrying the legacy of humanity with them. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Adrian felt a glimmer of hope. The Pioneer's edge limped into neutral space, its battered hull barely holding together after the harrowing escape. Adrian and Lyra had spent hours patching systems, rerouting power, and ensuring the ship was at least functional. The silence in the cockpit was thick with exhaustion, but beneath it lay a shared determination. They had survived, and with them, the story of humanity. Adrian stared at the glowing cube secured in its case. Its soft light pulsed steadily, a constant reminder of the responsibility they now carried. The weight of history rested in their hands, and the galaxy was waiting for what came next. Lyra broke the silence, her voice quiet but firm. We need to figure out where to go. The Zarth won't stop hunting us, not after what we've done. Adrian nodded, leaning back in his seat. The Galactic Archive Collective. They have the resources to protect the cube, to broadcast its contents to every corner of the galaxy. Lyra frowned. You trust them? After how they've treated you? It's not about trust, Adrian said. It's about reach. The Collective is the only organization capable of disseminating this information on a galactic scale. If we try to do it alone, We'll fail. Lyra sighed, rubbing her temples. Fine, but we can't just waltz into a GAC station with the Zarth breathing down our necks. They'll be watching for us. Adrian tapped the console, pulling up a map of nearby systems. There's a collective outpost on Althar Prime. It's remote, well-defended, and not on the Zareth's usual patrol routes. We'll head there. Lyra raised an eyebrow. That's assuming we can make it. The ship's hanging by a thread. Adrian gave her a faint smile. We've made it this far. A little farther won't kill us. The journey to Althar Prime was tense but uneventful. The Pioneer's Edge limped through hyperspace, its engines groaning with every jump. Adrian and Lyra took turns monitoring the ship's systems, their exhaustion evident but unspoken. Neither of them wanted to acknowledge the gravity of their mission aloud. It was easier to focus on survival. As they approached the outpost, Lyra ran a quick scan of the surrounding space. No Zareth signatures, she said, relief clear in her voice. Looks like we've got a clear path. Adrian exhaled slowly. Finally, some good news. Let's not waste it. The outpost came into view, a sprawling station orbiting a vibrant blue-green planet. Its gleaming spires and well-maintained docks were a stark contrast to the Pioneer's Edge, which looked like it might fall apart at any moment. Adrian guided the ship into one of the docking bays, the landing gear groaning under the strain. The docking process was smooth, but Adrian's nerves were frayed. As the airlock hissed open, he turned to Lyra. Stay close, we don't know who we can trust here. Lyra smirked, tapping the plasma pistol holstered at her side. I wasn't planning on wandering off. Inside the station, the air was crisp and sterile, a stark contrast to the stale metallic tang of the Pioneer's Edge. Adrian and Lyra moved quickly, the glowing case containing the cube held tightly in Adrian's grip. The station's corridors were bustling with scientists, technicians, and explorers, all engrossed in their work. They reached the central archive chamber without incident. The room was vast, its walls lined with towering databanks and holographic displays. At the center stood a tall figure in a crisp uniform, their posture radiating authority. Captain Adrian Blake, the figure said, their voice calm and measured. You've caused quite a stir. Adrian hesitated, his grip tightening on the case. You know who I am? The figure smiled faintly. Word travels fast when you destroy a Dyson Sphere and evade a Zareth fleet. I'm Director Saren Callis of the Galactic Archive Collective. Welcome to Althar Prime. Adrian relaxed slightly but remained cautious. If you know why I'm here, then you know what I've brought with me. Callis's gaze flickered to the case. The cube, the remnants of humanity's legacy. Lyra stepped forward, her tone sharp. And what are you planning to do with it? Lock it away in some vault? Callis raised a hand, their expression serious. I understand your concerns. The Zareth have spent centuries trying to erase humanity's existence from history. If this cube falls into the wrong hands, the consequences could be catastrophic. That's why we're here, Adrian said. Humanity's story deserves to be told no matter the risks. Callis studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Agreed, but we need to proceed carefully. If we broadcast this information recklessly, it could spark chaos. Or worse, war. Over the next several hours, Adrian, Lyra, and Callis worked together to unlock the cube's full contents. Holographic projections filled the archive chamber, displaying humanity's history in vivid detail. Scenes of triumph and tragedy unfolded before them. Earth's vibrant ecosystems, the construction of the Dyson Spheres, the rise of their interstellar empire, and the devastating wars that led to their downfall. Adrian felt a lump in his throat as he watched. It was both awe-inspiring and heart-wrenching, a testament to humanity's dual nature. Their capacity for greatness was matched only by their capacity for destruction. This is incredible, Callis said quietly. Their achievements were unparalleled, and their mistakes, a warning for us all. Lyra crossed her arms, her expression pensive. So, what now? How do we make sure this story doesn't get buried again? Callis turned to Adrian. The collective can disseminate this information across the galaxy, but we need your help. You've seen firsthand what the Zareth are capable of. We'll need a strategy to counter their influence. Adrian nodded. Start with the truth. Let every species see what humanity was capable of, the good and the bad. Show them the warnings left behind in the Dyson Sphere. If we present this as a lesson rather than a threat, we might avoid another war. Callis smiled faintly. Wise words, Captain. The broadcast was prepared meticulously, the holographic data from the cube condensed into a series of powerful, poignant messages. The collective's transmitters sent the broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, ensuring it reached even the most remote civilizations. The response was immediate. Across the galaxy, species reacted with a mixture of awe, fear, and curiosity. Some marveled at humanity's achievements, inspired by their ingenuity and resilience. Others focused on the warnings, vowing to avoid the mistakes that had led to humanity's downfall. The Zarth Dominion, as expected, denounced the broadcast as dangerous propaganda, but their influence was weakened by the truth. For the first time in centuries, their grip on galactic history began to loosen. In the days that followed, Adrian and Lyra found themselves hailed as heroes, though Adrian rejected the title. He had no interest in fame or glory. What mattered to him was the knowledge they had preserved, the legacy of a species that had once been dismissed as a myth. As they prepared to leave Althar Prime, Callus approached them. "You've done more than anyone could have hoped. Humanity's story is safe, thanks to you." Adrian smiled faintly. "It's not about us, it's about them." Callus nodded, their expression thoughtful. "What will you do now?" Adrian glanced at Lyra, who smirked. Knowing him, probably dive headfirst into another reckless mission. Adrian laughed softly. "She's not wrong. There's still so much out there, so many stories waiting to be uncovered." Callus extended a hand. "Whatever you do, know that you'll always have allies here." Adrian shook their hand, then turned to Lyra. "Ready?" Lyra grinned. "Always." As the Pioneer's Edge departed Althar Prime, Adrian stared out at the stars, the weight of their journey lifting. Humanity's story was no longer a legend, it was a legacy, and he was ready to write the next chapter.